Friends, we're back in a Targa, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's different. This one has a lot of sway. Well, they call it Alcantara, and the Targa bar looks different, but more importantly, there's more of this. About a year and a half ago and 250 miles that way, you and I shot the tech review of the then new 991.2 with a whole new family of engines that include turbochargers. Now that episode didn't just include sexy things like turbochargers, it included boring things like active aero in the front of a car. Usually you don't get that kind of stuff. Usually it's like Chevy Cruze and Ford Fiesta. But this caused some infighting in Zuffenhausen, in the family, because the engineers that deal with like the driving dynamics and the performance of the engine, they want as much air going to their engine. They don't want it blocked. They don't care about the aerodynamics. But then the people who sell the cars, the engineers that try to make it pass all of like the different tax schemes around the world, they want the active aero. Well, think of this as the compromise, because this one, they took out the active aero to get the air back to the engine to make it more powerful, but the reality of the situation is they had to change the front, at least the design, to get more air in the back. So they had to change the spoiler in the back for this to go up a little higher to balance out the changes in the front. Get it? Okay, so we are driving this in beautiful Lake Tahoe, California. Now that means a couple of things. High elevation. Combine that with a car with two turbochargers we discussed in the tech review. Bigger turbochargers. This is what we need to unpack, not the 20 horsepower. Forget about the 20 horsepower. We already found that the Carrera, or really the Targa version we drove, was plenty fast. What we need to focus on is that torque, 37 extra pounds from a flat 6. So let's put our foot into it going up a hill at high altitude. And this is where normally a flat 6 would have a problem. Dealing with passing power, dealing with acceleration from a dead stop, even a high horsepower one. But by adding, it's not just adding 37 extra pounds, it's 37 extra pounds and it still comes in at 2100. So again, I got another hill here, put our foot into it, I'm in third gear, and it's noticeable over that Targa we just drove. Noticeable to the point where, forget that I said I wanted the other one, I want this one. So here we have a bit of a conundrum. Suspension upgrades don't necessarily go together with roof options. So the good news in a GTS is the PASM with the sports suspension is fitted as standard. Now, as a recap, sports suspension in a 991 is a stiffer suspension and it rides 10 mils lower. Lovely, right? Well, it's only fitted to the GTSs with a hardtop. Opt for a folding roof, or my favorite, a Targa, and sadly, you have to forego the sports suspension. Now, I really sat with this because I don't like that concept, and I spoke with Achim, who runs all of vehicle dynamics for the 911 program, and his logic was, the only way to put it, very practical. And he said, you know what, when the car is new, the support suspension works great, but our concern is warranty claims down the road on squeaks and rattles for a car that has an open roof that is inherently not as stiff, but has a stiffer suspension, might create a problem down the road. I think there needs to be like a waiver that people like me can sign to get a Targa with a sport suspension. Thoughts? Okay, can I take a moment to point out just how stunning the Lake Tahoe region is? Now that we got that out of the way, let's unpack some driving dynamics. So between the tech review and this episode, we've discussed all the changes that make a GTS a GTS. Yes, there's the power, but really, if I'm honest, it's more of that suspension changes, and we'll talk to the guy behind it in a coming episode. But here's the thing. You and I just drove that Targa 4S. Stunning vehicle, but if I'm being completely honest with you, even putting my foot into it at higher altitude, there isn't a whole hell of a lot difference. But you still notice as we come around this sweeper here and the stunning scenery, this is a bit more raw than that 4S we just drove. Now granted, that car has a lot of the bits that are fitted to this car. The all-wheel steering, suspension, PASM, all that kind of stuff. But the changes that are not on offer in the 4S, like less sound deadening, the extra downforce in the back, the change in the front, makes this, raw is a good term, but it underscores the point that, at least in the Porsche world, it's more than the sum of its parts. Okay, so let's take a tourism break for 1 minute from Porsches, because we have run into one of cinematic history's most storied locations, and that is the West Coast compound of the Corleone family on Lake Tahoe. Now you were looking at and saying to yourself, well, gee, that doesn't look like the compound where Michael and his wife almost got shot, and it certainly doesn't look where they had the baptism of the child. Well, now it's fancy homes, and the bandshell, the gazebo, whatever you want to call it, is gone. They've got like a fire pit over there. But most importantly, there's two things here. Number one, Lake Tahoe, where Fredo got shot. And number two, and this is special for us today, they even left the rowboat where Fredo got shot. A note about the color. While I love the red roof and the red stitching, it's just too much black. Black on black with black carbon fiber and black trim that make it a GTS, with black in the back on the taillights, black in the front on the front spoiler. It's just too much black. This needs a contrast, and I would argue with all that black trim, it needs a color to make the black trim stand out. So far, you and I have been discussing the important changes from Carrera and Carrera S to GTS. Things like engine, suspension. However, there are some other changes, like a lot of black trim. For example, the wheels, some of the black in the front spoilers, that's been completely redesigned. Tinted rear turn signals, black trim over the engine cover. But most importantly, there's that black Targa bar. And if I'm honest, I don't know if I like it or not. However, it can be swapped out for the standard silver or aluminum Targa bar. So think of this as like a bonus question. If you were buying one of these, which color Targa bar would you go with? Now, a couple of notes. Yes, we discussed all of the changes on the interior as well as the exterior that make a GTS a GTS. But it's important really to understand that this one with the black on black with the black carbon fiber, it can be fitted with a two-tone interior or the aluminum like we had in the 4S. So you don't necessarily need to lose the extra power and the suspension changes of a GTS to get the more, I would say, refined look of the 4S. And there's one topic you and I still need to cover here, and it's not usually a topic we cover when we feature cars like this on the show. There's no other way to put this, but this, the way it's equipped, 160 grand, that's a bit of a deal. Now follow my logic on this one for a minute. I told you guys, 3 weeks ago, that of all the cars I featured on the show for now almost 8 years, our birthday's coming up in like 2 months, by the way, the 4S Targa is the one that has a daily, out of all the cars. But now we have this, and you would think I'd say, yeah, I'm gonna take this because it has more power, or it's just more raw, as we just found out. But the reality is, it's because I'm a cheapskate. If you were to equip this the same way as a 4S Targa, this would be a 10% savings because all of the stuff that is fitted as standard. Now granted, I wouldn't want this color, and I would definitely want the aluminum Targa bar, but I'm kind of surprised that I'm coming to you with this. And there's still further numbers here that I'm shocked on. This is a huge makeup of the total sales of 911s in the US. It makes up like 25% of the product mix annually. And furthermore, most of them are rear-wheel drive. So I think I like the people that drive these things. So that begs a question here. Now, I told you the 911 that I would want, but now that we've looked at the GTS, my question is very simple. What 911 would be the 911 that you would daily? I'm not talking about going on a track with a GT3. I would probably daily a GT3 too. But what would be the 911 you would daily and why? And also, you know what? Tell me how you would have it built. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with two things. Number one, it pains me to say this, but YouTube has butchered the algorithm and the subscription module so badly I have to ask you to unsubscribe, resubscribe, and click notifications. And number two, a fun fact. So I just hit you with a lot of boring sales numbers. I'm going to hit you with one more, but this one is not boring. And that is, how many people opt for a manual transmission that buy a GTS? 5%? 8%? 9%? How about 10%? Well, it turns out that the people that opt for a manual transmission in a GTS is a whopping 37%. Until I see you next time, bis später.